So hello, everybody. Welcome to this talk sponsored by the Institute of World Politics. For those of you who are new here, IWP is a graduate school of national security, intelligence, and international affairs. We offer a doctoral program, 7 master's degree programs, including 2 that are online, and 18 certificates of graduate study. If you are interested in learning more about us, please feel free to speak to one of our staff at the conclusion. But as this is an online event, feel free to put it in the chat function. To support the work of IWP, please visit iwp.edu/donate. Today we'll be hearing from Dr. Norman Bailey, who will discuss the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords. What do they mean for MENA? This lecture is part of a series on the MENA region, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Dr. Norman Bailey is an adjunct professor of economics and national security at IWP and a professor of economic statecraft at the Galilee International Management Institute. Dr. Bailey was a senior staff member of the National Security Council during the Reagan administration and of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence during the George W. Bush administration. Please help me welcome Dr. Bailey.
Thank you very much, Sean, and good morning, everyone. This is the second in our monthly lecture series on the MENA region, Middle East, North Africa. Last month, we discussed the MENA region itself to give the appropriate background. The Middle East, North Africa region consists of 20 countries, from Morocco in the west to Iran in the east. And it is predominantly Arab, with the major exceptions being Turkey, Iran, which is about 50% Persian, ethnic Persian, and Israel, which is 80% Jewish. And it is predominantly Muslim, with the only exceptions being the approximately 10 million Coptic Christians in Egypt and the 7 million Jews in Israel. Other non-Arab peoples are without a country of their own, are the Berbers of North Africa and the Kurds of Iran, Iraq, Syria, and other parts of the Middle East. The Muslim countries are divided into the Sunni Muslim and the Shia Muslim. The Shia Muslim are concentrated in Iran, Iraq, and Syria and Lebanon. The rest of the MENA region is predominantly Sunni Muslim. Today, our main topic is going to be the Abraham Accords. I subtitled the whole series last month as The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. The Abraham Accords are one of the few good elements of what's going on in the Middle East, and we will devote most of our attention today to the Abraham Accords. However, one feature of these monthly talks is going to be whatever special in the MENA region between the last talk and the current talk. And in this particular case, a lot of ink has been spilled over the elections in Lebanon, which I could subtitle as Much Ado About Very Little. There's the so-called commentators have spent a lot of time talking about the defeat of Hezbollah, that the enemies of Hezbollah won the elections. This is absolute nonsense. The Hezbollah and its allies still have maintained a majority in the Lebanese legislature and elected the Amal representative, which is the major Shia party allied with Hezbollah, which is, of course, a terrorist organization, which really controls Lebanon and has for some time. Was reelected as Speaker of the legislature. It's true that the anti-Hezbollah Christian Party gained a few seats. The pro-Hezbollah Christian Party lost a few seats, and some independents who are independent of Hezbollah were elected to the legislature. Nevertheless, the National Assembly is still controlled by Hezbollah, and in any case, it doesn't really make any difference because the state in Lebanon is an empty shell. The legislature and the executive control very little, if anything. The national armed forces are helpless against Hezbollah. Hezbollah is much larger and better equipped than the Lebanese armed forces. It doesn't really matter who has the votes. Hezbollah has the bullets, and that's what's important. So the Lebanese elections, it was fairly, one of the more interesting aspects of the elections is that they actually took place and were apparently fairly honest, but they mean really practically nothing. At this point, Sean, let me pause and before we go on to our main topic today, ask if there are any questions with reference to the Lebanese situation.
As of right now, Mr. Bailey, it doesn't look like we have any questions either on the Zoom or on Facebook right now. So I think we are good to continue.
There's one that just came up.
Just came up. Is Amal still designated as a terrorist organization?
No, Amal was never designated as a terrorist organization. Amal is simply the major Shia political party in Lebanon. Hezbollah, of course, is designated a terrorist organization by many countries around the world.
And just double check the Facebook group and our Facebook live stream, and it looks like we still don't have any questions on there.
Okay.
So if there are no other questions in the Zoom chat, I think we are good to continue.
Okay. If anybody has any questions about the Lebanese situation, I can also address them at the end of the talk. Okay, let's move on to our main topic today, which is the Abraham Accords, which I can subtitle "Much Ado About a Great Deal." The Abraham Accords started to take place in the latter part of last year and have developed very, very rapidly. Israel has, for many years, had regular diplomatic relations with two of the Arab countries, Egypt and Jordan. This, however, has been what one might refer to as a very cold peace. There has never been any particular cordiality or any large number of travel in between and cultural interchange, social interchange, and so on and so forth. It's been a very cold peace. And the previous government in Israel decided to work upon the contacts that Israel had been having sub rosa with several of the Gulf states as well as with Morocco over a substantial period of time, mostly having to do with security, defense and security issues. That these contacts have been taking place over a long period of time and mostly were the result of the Iranian situation and the threat that the Gulf states, which of course included Saudi Arabia as well as the smaller Gulf states, feel with reference to the Iranian threat. Towards the end of last year, of the year before last, the Israelis and the authorities of several of the Arab countries began to make these contacts public, and then started having public meetings, and having also agreements reached and so on. As of right now, there are then these became to be called the Abraham Accords, and because Abraham is supposedly the progenitor of both the Jews and the Arabs. In any case, as of this point, the countries that are involved with the Abraham Accords are Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates on the Arabian Peninsula, and Morocco in the far west of the North African region. Sudan also entered the Abraham Accords, but that has been suspended as a result of the coup d'etat that took place some time ago. At any rate, these accords very rapidly became effective. There is now a very great deal of travel between Israel and the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco. Agreements have been reached and signed in the commercial areas, in cultural and social areas, and in the case of Morocco, even in the defense area, which is extremely important. The UAE and Israel have also signed a free trade agreement. This is extremely significant. The most significant thing that's going on right now, however, is the various indications that the Saudi Arabia, which is undoubtedly the 80-ton elephant in the region, is moving towards having an agreement with an Abraham Accords agreement with Israel. Just in the last few weeks, following things have happened. Israelis can now obtain a visa and visit Saudi Arabia with an Israeli passport. Until now, in order for an Israeli to visit Saudi Arabia, the Israeli had to have a foreign passport, an American passport, a British passport, whatever. Secondly, private deals between Saudi and Israeli companies amounting to tens of millions of dollars have been signed on water management, agricultural technology, and medical technology. Thirdly, there has been the sale of several Israeli security systems to Saudi Arabia. Fourthly, Saudi Arabia is funding to the extent of $2 billion an investment fund set up by Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law, to invest in Israeli projects. And the funding came through the Saudi Public Investment Fund, which is the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund, and thus obviously has to have had the approval of the Saudi government, and specifically with Mohammed bin Sultan, who is the crown prince of Saudi Arabia and who really runs the country. Fifthly, there is an upcoming, quote, semi-official, unquote, meeting scheduled to sign agreements on aviation, research and technology in medicine, agriculture, water, and energy. What does semi-official mean? I've asked several people in the Israeli government what they mean by that. And the answer was that the Israeli participants are going to be participating in their, quote, personal capacities, unquote, other than as officials. Okay, if everybody's comfortable with this obviously phony situation, that's perfectly okay with me. Finally, and this took place, among other things, because of the very enthusiastic cooperation with the Abraham Accord countries, as well as encouragement by the US. The transfer of islands in the Red Sea, these are tiny uninhabited islands that are claimed by both Egypt and Saudi Arabia, and to be transferred from Egypt to Saudi Arabia. All of this taking place within the last few weeks gives the very strong impression that the Saudis are very likely to be joining the Abraham Accords in the fairly near future. They it was expected by many commentators on the Middle East that Mohammed bin Sultan was waiting for his father, the king, to pass away before they would actually join the Abraham Accords. But this may no longer be the case. He may have decided that he's going to go ahead and do it anyway. The importance of this cannot be overstated. The adherence of Saudi Arabia to the Abraham Accords outweighs in importance all the rest of the Abraham Accord countries put together, of the Arab participants. The two most important Arab countries in the entire MENA region are, without any doubt, Egypt, because of its very large population, and Saudi Arabia, because of its location and the fact that the holy places of Islam are in Saudi Arabia. In fact, the official title of the king of Saudi Arabia is not king, it's guardian of the two holy places, Mecca and Medina. What does this mean as far as the geopolitical situation in the Middle East and North Africa is concerned? Okay. You now have two blocks in formation, and they are directly confronting each other. One is the Shia Muslim bloc, led by Iran and its dictatorial theocratic government, with great influence in Iraq and in Syria and Lebanon, and controlling two of the principal terrorist groups in the Middle East, Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in the Gaza Strip, as well as Islamic Jihad, which is a third terrorist organization, and so on. That and we'll come back to this, and in Yemen, where the Houthis, who are controlled by Iran, are in control of a great portion of the country. We'll come back to this because it's very important. That's Iran and its allies, or what's sometimes called the Northern Arc, is one side of the geopolitical situation. The other side of the situation is now Israel, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates. Morocco, of course, is way off in the west, and that's a different geopolitical situation, which we will discuss in future talks. On the other side, the importance of Yemen is that this is an Iranian proxy, an Iranian ally that is behind the Israel Sunni bloc. And that is a very important geopolitical and military fact. And the Saudis and the Emiratis have not succeeded in defeating the Houthis in Yemen, although they tried for a long time. And that's a very serious threat. Otherwise, as we will see, the momentum is on the Israeli, Egypt, Saudi side. The following countries in the Middle East are on the fence in this geopolitical situation. Turkey, Jordan, Kuwait, Qatar, and Oman. In no particular order, Oman was considered at the beginning of the Abraham Accord movement. It was considered that Oman was going to be one of the first countries to join the Abraham Accords. This has not happened. This is apparently due to the fact that the former sultan passed away and the new sultan is much less pro rapprochement with Israel than the former sultan was. And of course, Oman is on the borders on Iran for all practical purposes in the Gulf, and it has to feel that it's careful in its foreign policy and its foreign activities and so on. Qatar is a Gulf emirate. It is very different in its foreign policies from the Emiratis and the Bahrainis. Qatar has for a long time been one of the principal supports of the terrorist organizations in the Middle East. It is also its propaganda tool, the Al Jazeera press agency, is one of the principal propaganda wings of the extremist Muslim movements in the Sunni countries. It is generally a very bad actor. It, however, also hosts an American airbase, and President Biden, in his infinite wisdom, declared Qatar to be a major non-NATO ally. This is frankly ludicrous, but in any case, it has been happening. The other Gulf states, with the exception of Kuwait and Oman, tried to force a change of government in Qatar by cutting off economic relations, social relations, transportation, and so forth with Qatar for a long period of time. It didn't work. The Qataris, who are in per capita terms the wealthiest country in the world because they have enormous gas wealth, which they share with Iran, incidentally. The gas field is owned jointly by Qatar and Iran, which is the major explanation for the highly anti-Western, anti-U.S. And anti-Israeli policies of the Qatari government. It's a rather strange situation. Again, however, it can be explained in the same way that Oman can be explained in terms of hesitation to join the Abraham Accords, and that is it almost borders on Iran. It has to be very careful, and it has traditionally been quite anti-Israeli. I mean, it's all of these countries were anti-Israeli for a very long period of time. But Qatar was particularly strong, along with Algeria and North Africa, in its anti-Israeli and anti-Semitic foreign policies. Jordan is an interesting situation. It has had diplomatic relations with Israel for a long time. It has not, however, been enthusiastic supporter or a supporter of any kind of the Abraham Accords, unlike Egypt, which has adopted the Abraham Accords in a wholehearted fashion. The Jordanians have kept hands off pretty much. They can't take an openly anti-Israeli attitude because they depend on Israel completely for electricity, water, and gas. So that if the Israelis decided to cut off those three supplies the Iranian economy would collapse almost immediately. On the other hand, a majority of the population of Jordan are of Palestinian origin. This is a very important element and explains a great deal about the hesitation of the Jordanians to enthusiastically endorse the Abraham Accord movement and so on. And they're not going to. They also are very strong supporters of the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, despite the fact that this, of course, is a threat to Israel. Turkey. The Turkey, of course, is a dictatorship posing as a democracy. President Erdogan is a dictator. He is a very unstable individual. He has run hot and cold over just about everything in the Middle East. His relations with Iran, his relations with Israel, his relations with the Sunni countries. Right now, he's on a charm offensive to try to build his relationships with the Sunni countries on the one hand and with Israel on the other hand. His problem, of course, is that nobody believes him. On the other hand, Turkey is a very important country in the Middle East. It is the only country in the Middle East whose armed forces are comparable to those of Israel, although it does not have nuclear weapons, of course. And the Israeli military dominance of the region is not only due to the fact that the Israeli armed forces are extremely well equipped and well trained and effective, but Israel is the only country in the whole MENA region that at this point has nuclear weapons. And that, of course, is one of the important reasons why those countries which are scared of the Iranians are embracing the Israelis. On the other hand, it is estimated that Israel probably has at this point something in the area of 90 nuclear warheads, several of which are mounted on missiles carried by Israeli submarines, which are permanently in the Gulf. And this means that even if Iran does achieve the capability to produce nuclear weapons, and incidentally, there's a great deal of misunderstanding about all of that. Once they have the ability to produce nuclear weapons, does not mean that they immediately have nuclear warheads. I mean, that's another technology which has to be developed by them, and it makes it the fact that the Israelis have nuclear weapons and they're mounted on some of them are mounted on submarines in the Gulf means that it's highly unlikely, even if Iran were to develop the nuclear capacity and the ability to deliver the nuclear weapons, that they would attack Israel openly, because they would know that Israel would immediately respond, and Iran would cease to exist as a functioning entity. Other people, more realistic, are concerned about Iran eventually miniaturizing nuclear weapons. This takes time. This is not something that can be done overnight. It would take probably another 2 or maybe 3 years to develop miniaturization. This is after they already have the ability to deliver nuclear weapons. And then, however, they could supply their proxies, terrorist organizations such as Hezbollah and Hamas with miniaturized nuclear weapons, and this would be a very serious threat to Israel as well as to the Sunni Arab countries in the region. This is far in the distance at this point. And let me make one other important military point that is overlooked in many of the analyses of the situation. Iran has supplied Hezbollah and Hamas with thousands of rockets and guided missiles. Now, Israel has been attacked by these rockets, both from Lebanon in the past, both from Lebanon and from the Gaza Strip. Israel has developed a very sophisticated and highly effective and efficient missile defense system and rocket defense system, which consists of various levels of defense from low-flying missiles to high-flying rockets and in between, from the Arrow system and the Iron Dome system. And the problem, however, and in the past they've been very effective, intercepting 90+% of all the rockets sent from Lebanon and from Gaza. However, the thousands and thousands of rockets and missiles, including guided missiles, that have been supplied by Iran to Hezbollah, and not so much, but quite a lot, also to Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza, mean that in a future war between Israel and one or both of these terrorist organizations, they could fire hundreds and hundreds of rockets every day. And a missile defense system, which depends on an anti-missile missile to destroy a missile or a rocket, simply cannot deal with that kind of numbers. However, at this point, I'm given to understand that the laser defense system which Israel is developing has gone now past the testing period and is into the production period. And eventually, of course, it will be a deployment. A laser-based anti-missile system is an entirely different kettle of fish, because one of these laser cannons can fire over and over and over again, so that one of them can kill not one enemy missile or rocket, but many over a period of time. And if you have a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen of these laser cannons on your side, they can handle hundreds of missiles and rockets coming in. In terms of production and deployment, it probably will be another year, maybe 2 years, sometimes somewhere in between, before they begin to be deployed on the borders of Lebanon and Gaza. Nevertheless, this will be an extremely significant development, because many people believe, and I think correctly, that if the Iranian regime feels that it's under serious threat internally, and there's a great deal of anti-regime sentiment in Iran, constant demonstrations. Some of them are ethnically based, because about 50% of the population of Iran, and this is a fact that's not generally known, almost half the population of Iran is not ethnically Persian. They are Baluchis in the southeast of the country, Arabs in the southwest of the country, and in the northwest, Kurds and Azeris. None of these are ethnic Persian people. So there are anti regime movements, particularly among the Kurds, the Arabs, and the Baluchis, not so much among the Azeris. But and a lot of it has to do with the Persian population itself, because of the very bad economic situation of the country and the manifest incapacity of the Iranian government to handle the economic situation of the country and to provide its people with the necessary elements for modern life. Uh, and so the feeling is among many people, and I think that this is a genuine concern, that if the theological dictatorship in Tehran feels it's under serious threat of being overthrown internally, it may tell its proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas and Islamic Jihad, simultaneously to attack Israel and perhaps also Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the Gulf states, and so on. This, particularly from Yemen, which the Iranians have also been supplying rockets and missiles to Yemen. And if all this happens simultaneously, it would overwhelm the current defensive capacity of Israel, not to mention the defensive capacity of the Sunni Arab countries, which is very elementary at this point. Nevertheless, once the laser systems are in place, this will no longer be possible. Okay, let's talk about outside forces and how they affect the Abraham Accords. Okay, let's start with China. The Chinese are penetrating the Middle East and North Africa and all the rest of Africa, for that matter, economically and socially and culturally. And they are also developing a series of bases. This is very significant. This is not only cultural and economic, it's also, to a certain extent, military. They have a base already, a naval base in Qatar, which is on the Indian Ocean coast of Pakistan. They have one in Djibouti at the entrance to the Red Sea, and they're negotiating with the Sudanese to develop another naval base. Chinese warships in the recent years have entered the Mediterranean for the first time in history, and they haven't entered even the Indian Ocean and the Middle Eastern waters since the Ming Dynasty. Now, the Chinese Navy is going all over the place, and they are demonstrating that they are a very major military power as well as a very major economic. India, it has excellent relations with the Sunni Muslim states and with Israel, and is a major purchaser of the products of these countries, including oil and gas, as well as technological goods from other production from Israel and so on. Pakistan is an interesting situation. Pakistan is kind of in between South Asia and the Middle East. It is, of course, a Sunni Muslim country. It has very bad relations with India and has had from the very beginning. although it hasn't broken out in open warfare for some decades now. And Pakistan has been um, antagonistic towards Israel and basically cooperative with Iran. With the new political situation in Pakistan, however, there is some expectation that Pakistan may attempt to improve its relations with the Sunni states and possibly even with Israel. We need to see what the situation is there. And let's not forget that Pakistan is a nuclear power. Russia. The Russians, of course, have until recently, when they're now preoccupied for obvious reasons with the situation in Ukraine, have been extremely active for the last several years in the Middle East, North Africa region, the MENA region. They, for the first time, Russia under Putin was able to realize the dream of Russia for centuries to establish a permanent presence in the Eastern Mediterranean. In other words, pass through the Black Sea, the Bosphorus, and so on into the Eastern Mediterranean. And they now have a naval base and an air base on the coast of Syria. And they were, and still are, to a certain extent, a very significant factor in the Syrian situation, along with Iran, with Turkey, and with Israel. And the Israelis, when Russia attacked Ukraine, the Israelis found themselves in a very, very difficult situation because they have an agreement with the Russians that the Russians are not going to interfere when the Israelis attack Iranian installations in Syria. So they didn't want to endanger that agreement with Russia by openly supporting Ukraine. On the other hand, of course, they're under great pressure to support Ukraine, not only from the standpoint of the refugee situation and humanitarian assistance, but from the standpoint of military assistance. They have resisted this, and although they have allowed many refugees into Israel and have provided a lot of humanitarian assistance, including an entire hospital situation in Ukraine, they have not, the Israelis have not agreed to supply Ukraine with military assistance for the reason that I just explained. So this is a very delicate situation and so on. Europe is in a, even though it has developed greater unity as a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, has lost a great deal of the influence it once had, particularly the French and the British once had in the Middle East, and were replaced primarily by the United States. And that brings us to the situation of the United States in the Middle East at the present time, and also with the Abraham Accords. The Trump administration was very pro-Israeli and was very important in terms of encouraging the Gulf states, Morocco, etc., to enter into Abraham Accords with Israel. The Biden administration, luckily, has, in a somewhat more lukewarm fashion, continued this policy, and is now facilitating with the transfer of the islands the adherence, one hopes, adherence soon of Saudi Arabia to the Abraham Accords. So now, besides that, the U.S. has lost a great deal of its once very powerful influence in the Middle East. One reason for this is the disastrous evacuation of Afghanistan, and a lot of the backing and forthing of particularly the Biden administration, taking anti-Israeli attitudes and then pro-Israeli attitudes and anti-Saudi. It started out being very anti-Saudi uh, because of the assassination of the Saudi journalist in Istanbul, and other human rights violations by the Saudis, etc. And now is cozying up to the Saudis, and next month Biden is going to be visiting Saudi Arabia. But there's no doubt that the once very significant influence of the United States in the Middle East has been greatly eroded, and this, of course, is a very important geopolitical factor. Right now, in conclusion, let me say that the momentum is on the Israeli, Egypt, Saudi side, and this is because of the growing importance of the Abraham Accords. Also because of the internal problems that the Iranians are having. And so that doesn't mean that momentum is going to continue. It doesn't mean that it couldn't be reversed. But right now, it's looking good for the Abraham Accords countries. One might call the Israeli Sunni arc in the south and in the west, with Egypt and eventually Morocco, and against the Shia Iranian-led northern arc in Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. Okay, Sean, let me stop at this point and take questions.
Perfect, thank you. And we did have a couple questions come in, so I will let you know them in the order they did. The first one is from Chris, and it's a two-parter regarding the anti-Israel legislation passed by the Iraqi parliament. The first part is how seriously do you think the government of Iraq will enforce this new policy? And two, in light of the Abraham Accords, do you think this will lead to a certain degree of isolation and shunning of Iraq with the Gulf Cooperation Council?
Okay, with reference to the first part of the question assumes there is something called the Iraqi government, um, and that is an assumption that is questionable. The Iraqis haven't been able to make a government for a very long time, and now the exit of the very large delegation of Muqtada al-Sadr, who is a major Shia leader in Iran, means that there's no chance of forming a government. The anti-Israeli resolution that was passed by the Iraqi government, what exists of the Iraqi government, is of very little importance and is not taken seriously anywhere in the Middle East, either in Israel or by the Sunni countries. And at this point, Iraq is, with the exception of the autonomous Kurdish region in the north, is for all practical purposes part of the Iranian Shia arc in the northern part of the Middle East. Sorry. What's the second part of the question again?
The second part of the question is, in light of the Abraham Accords, do you think this will lead to a certain degree of isolation and shunning of Iraq within the Gulf Cooperation Council?
That's already in place, and had with nothing having to do with the resolution, the anti-Israeli resolution, because the Sunni countries of the Gulf and so on do not trust Iraq, because Iraq is a majority Shia country, and this is very since the downfall of Saddam, they have not had any kind of important relations with the Iraqis. Next question.
The next question comes from John. What effect has the Biden administration had on the Abraham Accords, specifically in regards to warming up to Iran?
Warming up to Iran?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, obviously, the Abraham Accord countries are very much opposed to the desire of the Biden administration to bring the so-called deal back into force. However, for various reasons, it looks extremely unlikely at this point that that's going to happen. The Biden administration has changed its policies at this point. It was very much in favor of the Palestinians, in favor of making deals with Iran. It was kind of an Obama 2 administration in this respect. And it has now changed. And Biden's trip next month to Israel and to Saudi Arabia is a prime indication of that. And its support for the adherence of the Saudis to the Abraham Accords is another indication. And of course, they pretty much abandoned, I mean, they're not going to admit it, but they pretty much abandoned any hope for a recreation of the so-called Iranian deal. So one would say that the Biden administration's Middle Eastern policies have evolved substantially in favor of the Abraham Accord countries. And Egypt also.
The next question we have is from Sarah. Why do you think Saudi Arabia began making their relationship with Israel, quote unquote, louder now during the Biden administration, especially as Biden continually criticizes Mohammed bin Salman? Do you think that Mohammed bin Salman had to do this with the Biden administration's position that the Middle East is not as much as a priority for them?
No, I think, well, this actually, I went over this during the talk in some detail. The Biden administration, I think, has decided now. One thing that has to be emphasized is the energy situation as a result of the Russian attack on Ukraine. All of a sudden, the Biden administration has realized that the United States, as well as the Western countries in general, are still dependent on fossil fuels, and that wind and solar energy isn't going to be able to take up the slack anytime in the near future. And consequently, they're cozying up to the countries that have supplies of oil and gas, and trying to and of course one of the principal countries here in that are the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia primarily. So one of the major reasons for Biden's trip is to convince the Saudis that all is forgiven as far as the Khashoggi murder is concerned, as long as they increase their oil production. So much for moral considerations, human rights, and so forth. When they clash with economic reality, pretty much human rights go out the window.
And the final question we have that came in is from Dr. Williams. In light of at least a superficial rapprochement between Turkey and Israel, might Turkey be joining the Accords?
Is Turkey what?
Joining the Abraham Accords, or I'm guessing a
No, I don't think they'll be, because Israel and Turkey have had diplomatic relations throughout this whole period, even though there have been periods when they didn't have an ambassador and so on. They never cut diplomatic relations. So it's not the same kind of situation as with the the Gulf countries and Morocco, which never had diplomatic relations with Israel. Um, the Turks are simply, for all kinds of different reasons, including that they're practically bankrupt, that they're cozying up not just to Israel, they're also cozying up to the Sunni Arab countries, and particularly to Saudi Arabia, for all kinds of reasons, including they want the gas pipeline to go through Turkey from Israel. Israel is going to be supplying a lot of gas to natural gas to Europe, and the Turks want the pipeline to go through Turkey. Well, if they want the pipeline to go through Turkey, they have to be friendly with Israel and so on. They want financial support from Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. Well, they can't be hostile to Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states and hope to get financial support. At this point, the Israelis have abandoned the original pipeline proposal, which was through Cyprus and Greece and into Europe, because the United States withdrew support from the project, and now they're depending for the future on conversion of the natural gas to LNG, either in Israel or in Egypt, which has offered to do so, and then shipping to Europe in the form of LNG. The Turks want a pipeline to go through Turkey. That's their reason. I think we're pretty much out of time, and I want to thank everybody for participating and for your excellent questions.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. And just to second that, thank you to all of you guys who have joined us today. If you are interested in attending any other upcoming events, making a gift to IWP, or applying to one of our graduate programs, please feel free to visit iwp.edu, where you can find that information there. But thank you again, and I hope everyone has a great day. And thank you, Dr. Bailey, for joining us today.
Thank you.